The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Probably not the most iconic and probably not the most recognizable like blockbuster series of films that ever was like graced our theaters. Came out at the right time where most superhero films were kind of considered as like box office poison for usually the most part. If you're not around like the time that people were most as reading comic books, most people would probably still think that these films were kind of just the introduction to most superhero like characters and what they're kind of are. Many of them were not as connected like many of these films, as they didn't exactly cross over with one another or had any sense of continuity. There are some like the Fox X-Men films, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films, and some other films like the Fantastic Four, the Blade trilogy, and the Netflix shows like Daredevil, Punisher, Jessica Jones, and Iron Fist. And it wouldn't be until in 2008 where Robert Downey Jr., who was kind of at his low, ended up playing the role of a lifetime, Iron Man. And that role in the Iron Man movie would not only end up making his career and very much changing his life, but it also ended up changing the life of one man that would end up making a profit from the newly established Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige. He would end up going on to birth and very much the kind of meta that's been happening within most TV shows and most media that has been happening, being of a cinematic universe. Starting with the phase one of its own movies, it would end up becoming a national success, at least to a success of their own right. And as time went on and more of these movies end up coming in, they end up getting a new ensemble of new heroes to kind of add to the long list of this entire world. The team would not only make very much fun superhero films that would be enjoyed independently regardless of where you were watching them, but by watching these films in the order that they came out, then would end up building up to the release of what would now be known as the Infinity Saga. From the sounds of it, the MCU very much sounds like it was actually kind of doing pretty well. That is to say that its current counterparts of a phase 4, 5, and at least sometime in the future for 6, aren't exactly been doing really well. It's not to say that the quality of their stuff is at least a little bit gone, but you can tell where a lot of their budgets would kind of going for things that they want to try and go out for versus things that they very much clear that the workers there are not exactly giving it their all, and in fact they're kind of just being very overworked because of like crunching deadlines and very much the demand of like making more and more of this stuff. Even general audiences are kind of being fed up with the whole notion of anything that has to do with like anything of the MCU for the most part, since it's been going on for like way too long, as many people kind of consider that Endgame was basically the last film that they ever saw and didn't bother continuing on with the other stuff. There have been many names as to what the feeling could honestly be. Most people say that it's just superhero fatigue, or that the lack of just interest for Marvel has just kind of been at an all-time low, or that the Marvel formula for every single one of its movies or shows have gotten stale and it's basically just on constant repeat. But I would like to kind of imagine that it's not that I don't think people are tired of these Marvel movies. I think most of them are just tired of the mediocre Marvel movies. I will admit that a lot of their stuff hasn't exactly been great. We've had some definite hits, but we also had some pretty bad misses and just really wasted opportunities as a whole. So instead of having to deal with every generic kind of like YouTube thing kind of going where they very much have to talk about how the MCU is fallen or like they're slowly trying to redeem themselves, I'm going to deal with most people end up doing. Make a Marvel movie tier list, because that's what I'm going to be doing for the whole video. Note that this will very much be a bit dated, as the last project I actually ended up seeing was Captain America Brave New World, so I haven't seen the other future projects yet. So there will be previous reviews on those, but keep those in mind if something I did say or has finished been like a while ago doesn't make it onto the list. Let's start off with the first film, that being Iron Man. The only Iron Man movie that is actually pretty good. It's a solid start. I get an A from me. Next, The Incredible Hulk. Really underrated, and the last time that the Hulk actually has his own movie, at least from the other one. It gets a nice B from me. Iron Man 2. It was total garbage, honestly. Whiplash was just a wasted character. Justin Hammer was only good because he had his funny moments, but the plot of Tony just thinking that he's gonna die soon, he's basically just doing like, fuck it, we ball, we'll just do whatever before, my heart stops, wasn't really a big fan of it. It got resolved, technically, but I just never really liked the film, honest. It gets an F. Thor, a film that has gotten honestly better over the years for just how really good Asgard just looks. The romance between Thor and Jane is actually really nice, and Tom Hiddleston is literally just the main highlight when it came to the Thor films, playing Loki. It gets a B. Captain America, the First Avenger. It's a solid film overall. I like it when Steve kind of just goes in there and just throws a shield and just basically just does whatever. Whole cast is solid. Red Skull's basically alright, but it didn't really do much special. I really enjoyed this film. B. The Avengers. If Blockbuster's film had a illustration, this would probably be the film to approve it, and I just overall love it. This is basically the build-up crossover for all of these Phase 1 movies they're very much built up to, and I think it's absolutely worth it. S. Iron Man 3. It wasn't Iron Man like 2 levels of bad, but it's not topping the first one ever. C. Thor: The Dark World. The Dark Elves were the worst part of the movie. Like, you couldn't get to remotely care anywhere near for these guys. Also, I didn't remember anything much from the plot. D. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Making this very much a spy thriller was probably the best idea in the world, and it was just fucking fantastic. It upped everything from the previous Captain America film, and it brought all the way over here as well, and I loved it. This shit's an automatic S. Guardians of the Galaxy. Ah yes, my favorite band of misfits. Probably not one of the most iconic films that they've very much been debuted in. It has good comedy, great action scenes, really good CGI, and very much knows how to tug on your heartstrings and make the most silliest of things feel almost really in character. Solid A. Avengers: Age of Ultron. I'll be honest, not the worst movie I saw. It's not perfect, I'll admit. Ultron is still a fan favorite of mine despite only being a one-off villain. The action, the characters, and the fights were still there. It's definitely not the weakest in the Avengers movie, but it's still a fun watch. I think just most people were just not liking it at the time during its release. He gets a B. Ant-Man. Paul Rudd is a charm in this movie, and as well as the rest of the cast. I love the effects of him making him small. Very much just gave the animators and kind of the effects artists to kind of just do whatever they want with him. Very much making the fights both be inside of a suitcase, on a fly, or literally just in a children's bedroom. Also adding a little bit of a heist element also enhances the viewing experience. It's a really solid film. B. Captain America: Civil War. It's iconic. It shows the differences in understanding of which of the heroes' choices go and how divided they got. Because neither were wrong, but neither were kind of fully right. Even when Zemo was the last straw for the heroes, he basically almost won. And I really came around to enjoy this whole thing. It's an automatic S. Doctor Strange. Love the visual effects in this trippy movie. Benedict Cumberbatch is absolutely fantastic. Solid small cast, terrible villain, except for Dormammu. It gets an A. Spider-Man: Homecoming. Solid for Spider-Man being handed back from Marvel. Wasn't too on board with Tony being a parental figure, as I kind of feel like he kind of take up most of like the movie, even though he only has like a very limited amount of screen time. But a lot of that was kind of saved within Michael Keaton being played as the Vulture. I think he actually did really well as that. Plus, it's also really kind of a fun ride to do on rewatch. It gets a B. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Still a pretty funny movie, great CGI, stellar cast, charming villain, and also really good fine music choices. It gets an A. Thor: Ragnarok. The best Thor film we'll probably ever get. Hulk, Loki, and Hela were all just great. Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster was a delightful treat, and the film is able to very much balance out a lot of the serious tension and the comedy, if not just right. It gets an A from me. Black Panther. Love the visuals and the kind of culture of Wakanda, and Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan both as T'Challa and Killmonger were great choices, and I really came around to liking this film. Loved it. It gets an S. Avengers: Infinity War. What can I say that hasn't already been said about this movie? It's getting an S, not only because it's the greatest crossover since the Jimmy and Timmy Power Hour, but having to introduce the main villain that has been built up over the course of these movies to not only have him be compelling, interesting, and a threat to everybody, but getting to understand as to why he's doing all of this. And it was such a fascinating way of doing it, leaving almost an ending that has completely shocked everybody to this day still. It gets a fucking S. Ant-Man the Wasp. It had the unfortunate thing of being after Infinity War, but it's a fine movie. The comedy's decent, the heart's still there, but the villains were just underwhelming, especially Ghost. It gets a C. Captain Marvel, the least relatable main character that I've probably ever seen. The plot was doing something with this movie, but they really picked it up the wrong script of all this whole thing, because I barely even want to rewatch this film. It gets a D. Avengers: Endgame. For the most, it was not the best finale that they could ever give for the MCU. and I honestly would have agreed. It takes the whole journey of all these films and combines them into a masterpiece of a final third act. It gets a goddamn S for sure. Spider-Man Far From Home. I kind of like the new settings that they kind of give Peter to very much kind of fight these bad guys, as well as have him to deal with the pressure of being a hero and trying to live a normal life. Mysterio was a great villain, and I like the illusion that they actually did with him, especially on the part that made Mysterio much more of a scarier threat. It gets a solid A. WandaVision. Marvel exploring TV was kind of a nice way to handle something like this. I love the relationship between Wanda and Vision as they make him very much believe a actual couple, as well as the other hints of the elements of the show that very much really add to the whole layers to kind of what's been going on in Westview. Wasn't really much of a big fan of the twists at the end, but I think it did a good job of always managing to do, and I still do have a lot of memories from this show. So it gets an A. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's good for what it's worth. It's not the best Disney Plus show out there, but not really a downright bad one. I actually came around to actually liking a lot more of the John Walker stuff much more. I think that shit's actually really interesting. But the main bad guys were emptying calories for me. But they brought back Zemo, so it gets a B. Black Widow. It's an alright movie. I do like Florence Pugh and David Harbour in this, but if this film was released around like the time of Phase 3, then it would probably have much more of an impact, because I feel like that this movie didn't really get the much more needed hype that it very much kind of deserved. Also, Taskmaster sucked. I'm just gonna say it, I did not care for Taskmaster. He was kind of just, I never liked him at all. It gets a C. Loki. We got hints of the multiverse here and there, but this show is just diving straight on in. The whole thing with the TVA, variants, alternate timelines, and universes, and how that this Loki is going to be trying to be a hero for the change, and it really works. You can very much see in not the progression that he very much ends up going on to, very much just starting out as the kind of his stock standard bad guy persona himself, to very much actually changing and not for the better, and kind of realizing something beyond more for him. It gets an S from me. What If? Want to see different possibilities that you want the answers to? They're here. Some are fun, some are great, some are kind of downright intriguing. The animation may keep you off from it, but it's a nice watch to at least see some cool concepts, at least of what they could have been. It gets a B for me. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Talk about an underrated film. Love the fighting choreography that they had and how the rings end up getting incorporated into it. It had a fantastic villain, cool action, and a solid story too. It gets an absolute S from me. Hawkeye. It's good. I like the dynamic between Kate Bishop and Hawkeye, and how Hawkeye has to very much deal with being kind of viewed as a hero and at one point being a bad guy. And despite that, Tony Dalton, which you may know him as Lalo Salamanca from Better Call Saul, was in only for like a few episodes, I came around to kind of like his character just at least a little bit. He did really nothing most of the part, but he was a fine addition. It's overall decent. It gets like a C from me. The Eternals. Balancing and introducing 10 characters to be in all some of the way the main people in one movie was a bad idea from the get-go. It's definitely the most different feeling and in its style, but the plot was just boring and it was just really predictable. And it's probably not the movie that has probably done the most damage to the MCU. It gets a D from me. Spider-Man No Way Home. This film is not only a great celebration of the character, but managing to weave in the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man film into this movie and somehow make it all work without taking any spotlight away from the main Spider-Man is a great feat to even have. It gets a S from me. Moon Knight. Oscar Isaac is just great in this show, and having to play two different people is honestly really good. The visuals from Moon Knight is just really cool. Ethan Hawke was a very intriguing villain, and despite that the finale not being what I kind of thought it would, it's still a great show and probably the only show I can recommend to people if they very much want to get into Marvel, as this show very much does not have any connected ties to the MCU, so very much viewing this solo is actually good. This show gets a solid A. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi's fingerprints is very much all over this movie for better or for worse. It's cool seeing the different ways that Strange can fight with the spells, as well as Wanda. But despite it being called the Multiverse of Madness, we literally only go to like 2 worlds, and that's basically all it is. The plot I kinda just forgot, but it's a okay watch if you want to see it on your TV screen. It gets a B from me. Miss Marvel. Like Moon Knight, I came around to really enjoy it. I like Iman Vellani's acting as Kamala Khan, and I thought she kind of ended up being annoying throughout all the show, but I'm kind of glad she wasn't, and I actually really came to like her character. It had a nice cast, decent CGI, but damage control and the Jinns were just forgettable. Like they were just actual garbage villains. It gets a B for me. Thor: Love and Thunder. A film to remind me that Taika Waititi should not touch another Marvel film again. The Marvel human in this one, which is turned up to being really awful. The cast is okay, Zeus was a little funny, and despite Gore the God Butcher being played by Christian Bale, he only had like 5 long scenes with him, and it's not like the Dark World like levels of bad, but I really wish we could have just gotten like a better step up from like Thor Ragnarok. I was just not really feeling it the whole film. See, She-Hulk: Attorney at Law. Despite me being able to sit throughout the whole show, I can agree that it was bad. I get what they were trying to go for, but this kind of felt like it was doing a huge disservice to the She-Hulk character and in her comics. And it just felt like they were trying to write just something else completely entirely that a lot of people were just not too happy about. It felt less of like an actual Marvel show and more just like a random like sitcom that they tried to kind of sprinkle in here. It gets an F. Werewolf by Night. Honestly, refreshing to see something new. Love the atmosphere, the style, how it leans into the classic horrors from older movies, and actually makes for a really good Halloween special. B. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This film is not only being a honor to Chadwick Boseman, but to try and make it without him is very much not an easy task to do. But I can honestly say that it is very much almost on par with the first. Namor is a very compelling antagonist, and the fights were very much well done, and the cast was solid in almost all the right places. It gets an A. The Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. It's a fun special. It's just very much Mantis and Drax doing what they're doing. You get a cameo from Kevin Bacon, and you get a wholesome ending. It gets like a B from me. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This film is the definition of it. The cast was fine, the visuals like alright, the plot was basic, but despite Kang being played by Jonathan Majors, he absolutely nailed the performance, and he dominated the screen anytime he appeared. I really wish that this character had stayed around longer in the MCU, because he had so much potential. But now it's just kind of a C-level movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. James Gunn leaves Marvel for DC. I really like what they did for a farewell for the Guardians, exploring Rocket's backstory, giving each of the individual Guardians a moment to shine, and the High Evolutionary being a vile, evil little shit that we have to take down was so good. It gets an A from me. Secret Invasion. You think the revealing that most of the Earth has been dominated by shape-shifting Skrulls would be an important event in the MCU, but to Marvel, it literally was not as important. Even when you have actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Emilia Clarke, yeah, that Emilia Clarke, it doesn't almost matter if your literal writing is just like doo-doo water. The story sucked. It was really boring to sit through every week, and it just felt like the show served no purpose at all, and it was kind of just directionless. It gets an F. The Marvels. I wasn't a big fan of this movie. The plot felt basic, the fights were okay, their villain was a legit who, and despite Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau being okay, Kamala Khan was probably the only saving grace in this movie. It kind of just felt like the silliness was just up to an 11 that I wasn't just really used to. It gets an F for me. Loki Season 2. It's just good. Its exploration of what free will is and a fated path that was destined was a interesting look, not only just for the cast to come to terms with and very much what they very much want to do, but also for Loki's character. For he is very much trying to find the best outcome for everybody, but one thing will end up dooming over the other in the process, and it's a really good exploration. I really liked how it ended, and I think it's just a nice fitting conclusion for our character. It gets an S from me. What If Season 2? It's alright. Good episodes, forgettable episodes, an okay finale. It gets a C. X-Men 97. Okay, I know this doesn't exactly count since it's not connected to the MCU, but the original X-Men animated series was a actual fantastic watch to very much kind of see 97, and 97 gives us so much more to add on to that. It has great writing, a solid narrative, stellar characters, fun action, and a cool villain. It's an automatic S for both of them, as I very much came around to really enjoying a lot of their stuff over the time, and it's just very cool. I very wanted to see more X-Men 97. Echo. I legit forgot to put this on the list. And the mere fact that I even forgot that I saw this, and that I forgot I was meant to even be here in the first place, very much speaks volumes for the quality of the show. F. Deadpool and Wolverine. I had a really good time with this film. Not only that it was a great third movie for Deadpool, and not only was it just a great highlight just to see Jack Human back and return as the Wolverine, but it was just a really nice song for a lot of the Fox X-Men films and its other past Marvel films that, as in the whole, was just really great. It had some great comedy, great villain, and a good ass entrance for Deadpool and Wolverine to becoming a part of the MCU. This motherfucker absolutely gets an S. Agatha all along. I had very low expectations for this show when I was kind of very much announcing that it was going to be happening, but I can say for certain that it was actually pretty good. I actually liked how they actually kept Agatha as her kind of dramatic evil self, allowing her to change over time. The cast with the Coven of Witches was actually really good. The WandaVision style was actually a really nice refreshing return, and it very much had an alright finale. It gets a nice B. What If Season 3? It's all downhill from here. This season convinced Marvel to just never tap into this show or its potential ever again, because there could have been so much more within this, but they really just ended up hammering home with a lot of these like useless questions that maybe it sounds nice and interesting on paper, but it didn't really translate all that well into it, and it just felt like that it was just wasting time on questions that like we could have gotten like better answers for, or at least better questions in general. It gets an F from me. Captain America Brave New World. It's mediocre. Red Hulk was cool, Harrison Ford did a good job as Thaddeus Ross, and Sam Wilson kind of just felt too stoic sometimes, and it kind of lost a little bit of that like relatability to me. But he did a good job, at least in this movie. It didn't really do anything that was like kind of bombastic or noteworthy, and it's a fine movie to actually kind of like, you know, sit down and watch if you just want to kind of turn your brain off. It gets a B. And that's all the current Marvel films that I very much have seen thus far. As I said before in the beginning, I haven't seen the other feature projects. If I have, I'll probably be doing a pretty short review on those stuff, as I haven't seen Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, because I'll be honest, I don't really care to see it. But Daredevil Born Again, I probably am going to be trying to see, though that also means I have to kind of watch a lot of the Netflix stuff in order to actually see that, since it's a continuation of the original. I just kind of wanted to do a bit of a tier list, since I think there's at least a good chance a lot of people think that like everything in the MCU has kind of become shit. And while I agree there are some absolutely like stinkers of films, I do think there's at least a bit of a potentiality that Marvel, at least in this multiverse saga, can at least come out on top and at least still make something worthwhile. Though I am probably going to say that I really do not want them to just reboot the MCU at all. Like, just leave it dead, leave it away for a while. If they want to reboot, maybe wait like a whole decade afterwards. Maybe, I honestly cannot tell, but it's kind of clear as day that most people just do not have a lot of trust and a lot of faith when it comes to anything within the MCU or what they're trying to do. Maybe the current multiverse saga is still kind of going good. Maybe I'm just kind of like a bit wrong, but just kind of wanted to do a bit of a tier list, just kind of like the funsies, and kind of just give like a whole review of the MCU as a whole currently. So yeah, that's really all there is to this video. Bye bye.